Hey everyone, welcome to part 3 of the review of Atomic Habits by James Clear. We're going over the second law in this particular segment. It's called Make It Attractive. And this was absolutely probably my favorite part so far because there was so much content in here and some of these psychological processes and ideas and thoughts that came out of this were absolutely something that really resonated with me. I think I can actually continue to get into. So, we start off with talking about how to make a habit irresistible, because that's really what we're saying here is how do you make it so that you just can't not do it, right? And I hate to use a double negative there, but you guys get what I'm going after here. And the first thing he brings into is that a lot of times we get in a situation where there is supernormal stimuli that cause us to allow something to be a habit. And this was a powerful thought in my mind, especially when you frame it in the context of junk food. I think when you think about nourishment in food, we all know we need it. We all know that it's something we have to survive, but it's something that if you're not conditioning yourself, the idea of eating celery and a beautiful green salad every day, all day is not the most appealing when there's this piece of whatever, pizza, fried chicken, you name it, dessert, cheesecake, I don't know. Which again is all fine in moderation, but we find ourselves saying it's a heightened version of reality. It is a food, so therefore we eat it and can sustain. Is it going to give us optimal performance and results? Absolutely not in the long run, but that's not what we're thinking in the moment. And a lot of times that also plays into another factor he brought in here, calling dynamic contrast, which is another thought of saying we combine sensations, right? So think about the salad versus the slice of pizza, right? While a salad can be absolutely beautiful, it can be green and have tomatoes and have all sorts of vibrant colors, it doesn't have that aroma of a piece of pizza or the texture necessarily of some other things. Well, salad has texture, but not nearly as much as some other things that were enjoyable. So the more senses you bring into it, the more it also comes back to. But it also, he likened this to external factors as well, such as like social media likes. So anytime we can get that feel, that rush, which then brings us into the dopamine discussion, we really start to feel like we're getting some sort of intrinsic feeling. There's a lot of things going on. Dopamine is one of them, but the one he points out the most. And so my key takeaway was dopamine's not just for when you experience pleasure, but also when you anticipate it, right? And that gets us to talking about how your habits start to look at your cues and how we have to get into that later on discussion of how do we make it attractive, which we haven't quite got into 100% yet. When I thought about dopamine in this example was the anticipation, I thought about the horse track. There's any number of examples, but I know going and watching the horses circle before they go out and actually getting into the starter gate and watching everything happen and people's betting picking up and things like that. You just have that whole environment where there's so many cues that say, this is attractive, this is a good time, this is fun, and all those centers in your brain are just firing. And so that was one of the things I thought of, because I enjoy going and sitting at the horse track. I usually take like 20 or 40 bucks and throw it in my pocket and that's it. So it's not a financial thing for me, but it's just fun. It's exhilarating. It comes down to a point in time where there's a finite end, and it's something that's super interesting. So we get into the functional ideas and thoughts, and we say temptation bundling is a way to absolutely look at how do we get to the point where we can say, let's put things together that are attractive and we can pair together. And it's kind of like the stacking idea. But in this case, we're saying if we take something less desirable, exercise, for example, for some people, how do we pair that with something more desirable so we have a higher chance of success at making it a good habit? So on the idea of making it desirable, he says something like, when you think about opening your phone to check Facebook, you should do 10 burpees the moment you open your phone. Again, a little crazy, but if you think about it, and that became habit for you, you could extend that and say, okay, I'm going to do something good every time I want to do a habit that I know is either neutral or potentially bad for me. I thought that was very interesting. Well, so chapter 9 was all about the role of family and friends. And I immediately, before I even read a single word, and I saw the title on this, was thinking environment. If you remember back in the introduction, he talks about how environment is a key driver, right? And so that was immediately where my mind went to, and certainly didn't really disappoint there. The Polgar family, chess, again, it reminds you of the role environment and social norms. So what is normal for you in your environment, whether that be you were brought up in your current environment or whatever? We absolutely adhere to social norms because it's what we've done forever. Going back to the days of caveman survival, social norms were at a certain level because you had to do that to fit in with a group and pack and mentality to survive. And that was super interesting to me because I think when you stop and come back around on that whole idea, that's all we're trying to do is be part of a pack. And that comes up again later. So I'll kind of get into that oftentimes, I should say. We get into the idea of the close, the many, and the powerful. So, and imitating each of those groups. And this could be where our environments and our influences come from. And so often here when we talk about the close, which is inner circle, so to speak, we talk about the 5 people you're closest with kind of idea. I know there's so many different angles. You are some of the 5 people you're closest with, or keep a close circle of 5 friends you want to be the most like. We hear that all the time, but it's really true. And the quote he had included in here was going in that same vein, was surround yourself with people who have habit you want to have yourself. You'll rise together. He provided examples in the book that were saying that you don't have to be one group, you could be 2 groups. So for example, the nerds exercise. Well, nerds, okay, it's kind of a derogatory term, I guess. I don't know what it is anymore sometimes. And then you don't really associate them with exercise. But if those 2 things are a group and they all aspire to do those things they like that are nerdy, quote unquote, and exercise together, that's the win-win example there. So the imitating of many, there's evidence in numbers, or so we believe, was what I took away as a statement here. And if you recall, this is where they were talking about the idea of the social experimentation that was done around a person being brought into a room with a group of actors and being shown the lines, a line and then a series of 3 lines. And for the first few, the group or a small group was like, yes, those are the closest length into that one. But as the examples came out, the group started to purposefully give wrong answers, clearly wrong answers. And it found that the more people in the group against the one person, so to speak, was absolutely influencing that person, even though they knew the answer was wrong, to give the answer of the group. And I immediately thought of this. I thought of some groupthink potentially as well, which I think is really exactly what's being explained here, is that we tend to lose our own thought in a group of people, even if we have a strong desire or know for a fact something is correct. When I look at this, and we used to say keeping up with the Joneses, I think we say keeping up with the Kardashians. So think about this from like a social media or just even a perspective, which kind of actually maybe even sort of the latter part of keeping up with the Kardashians, maybe even actually kind of borderlines on imitating the powerful. And I don't mean powerful because they hold a political office, but I do mean powerful because of the millions and millions of subscribers on Instagram and various social media platforms. That gives a certain power. But certainly power is always status driven, and we try to emulate those folks. So those 3 levels, I think there's some interplay between them, but they definitely have some very strong immediate sections. When I looked at those 3, I said, if I can center myself around the imitating the close around me, I feel like I give myself the best chance to be where I want to be now and in the near future. Do I project out for a long-term future? I don't know that I can know that. I don't know that anyone can. But that's where my mind went to there. So chapter 10 was all about how to fix your bad habits. And it was interesting to read through this because, again, I kind of thought this might be where it's going. I'm picking up the themes in the book here, and you guys probably have by now as well. When he says, make it attractive, and that's generally speaking about how good habits or pairing things together to ensure that you're controlling neutral or bad habits. But when we're talking about how to find and fix your bad habits, then making it unattractive, or what is seemingly the opposite, was the first thing that came to mind. And sure enough, he talks about the inverse of that. And the quote that hit me here, once you associate a solution with the problem you need to solve, you keep coming back to it. For me, it drove home that we are cue and prediction machines. And I use the word machine on purpose because remember, we talked about this And James Clear talked about this earlier on, about how the idea behind all of this is that we learn and basically put ourselves on autopilot. So when we are able to say, there's a cue, if I do X, Y is going to happen, or I will feel Y, or externally I will be viewed as Y, then we start to automatically say, that's that machine working for us, and we've got to figure out how to step in and either disassociate it or make it so that our preconceived notion doesn't follow through and isn't 100% on point. And we get into the discussion of talking about cravings, versus desire. So the difference of now and a future state and wanting to feel different, that's the desire part, right? So a desire means like I'm hungry, as a simple example. I should eat. Well, how do I want to feel? I want to feel full. Okay, very simple, straightforward. But it's the emotion that allows us to mark things good, bad, or indifferent within that whatever action it is. I just brought up eating, which is a very broad example. But maybe going back to the point of junk food. So you feel good, but it's not really good for you. So again, we have to figure out how to make that unattractive and say, how does that work? We have to reprogram our brain from have to get to. And when I hear that, I hear have to is a chore. So maybe that's how we fall into eating of junk food versus making dinner, an actual piece of grilled chicken or whatever the case is. And get to is an opportunity. So I get to actually do something good for myself. Or have to is an activity. And get to is a practice. And those two are my spins on these last, because when I look at it, I say an activity is, to me, says it's more passive, more prescribed, more whatever. A practice is something you're purposely looking to do because you're saying, I want to do X, Y, or Z better. And so that was kind of a key thing that clicked in my head in the have to get to argument was I said activity versus practice. And I think it just sets different levels to that. The last thing that kind of struck me here before I get to another quote I want to highlight here was the motivation ritual. What else can we say about this? I think you cue yourself, and we all know we do it. There's something that you do before something you enjoy. And if you can find a way to also then set another small habit in front of that, then what you can do is make an inflection point where you can say, I can now take this and move it in front of other things that either I do or don't like to do, and make that another stackable thing so that I can cue myself. So it's not an automatic machine going through and making these decisions, right? He used an example. He said, if petting dogs is something you always do, you're in the park and you always got to pet a dog. Perhaps maybe taking 3 deep breaths and smiling before you pet the dog because you get a good feeling is something you'll do. And the thought process there is that you could take that 3 deep breaths and that smile and transfer that over to something else. And it will help you bring in those same positive emotions and use that in the right way to stack that and move that forward. But I'll leave you on the quote here and then a few messages after that. But the key to finding and fixing the causes of your bad habits is to reframe the association you had about them. And again, we're starting to see this theme come out in the book here saying you have to simply find a way to make it be different, right? And it sounds so simple. I mean, it's so easy to say, right, Nate? I get it, but it's not. And I think that's why he's giving us some of these tools to say, like, what's your motivation ritual? Because if you have a motivation ritual tied to a good habit, you're going to obviously try to default to that. Are you viewing it as have to versus get to? And I'm going over some of the more recent things I talked about on this, but I felt like this is where a lot of the meat for me came from. And I gave you the most commentary on that. So I think you can tell that. So far, I am hooked on the ideas here. I have not read ahead yet. I have not looked at a lot of the other material out there because I know he has like a workbook and some things out there that you can purchase and do. I know they're out there, but I haven't looked at them. But that may be an extension of this series that we'll have to figure out, which we are at the halfway point. I appreciate you guys taking a look, staying with me. I know I tend to ramble. I know I am working on my on-camera skills and my note skills. I don't have a teleprompter yet as some part of my setup. And I think that's part of the thing that I'm working on, thinking about possibly investing in. But I do appreciate you guys dealing with me, looking down. I've been crafty with how I insert slides and things so you guys don't see me looking down at my notes that much. But yeah, I know you can certainly hear me in my tone and when I move, and so there. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me, all the feedback. I think I'm going to leave you with, what was your takeaway here and your one aha idea for how you might look to break a bad habit? And what's the one thing that's most powerful to you? Leave it down below in the comments, as well as anything else you can think of. And we'll catch you guys next Tuesday. Take care.